Have you moved cities or countries in your life?
I've moved cities.
Where have you lived?
Well, I lived in Imperial, Saskatchewan from the age of 1
And you
until
lived in Toronto?
the time I was born until I was 11. And then we moved to Saskatoon. And
Oh, sorry. What's the first place?
Imperial,
Imperial.
a little town.
Okay, then?
And then we moved to Saskatoon, but not completely, because my father still had the business in Imperial, and my brothers had to go to university. So we went to Saskatoon, and I would start school in Imperial, and then when university started around the end of September, we would go to Saskatoon, and we had a home. And first we had apartments. At that time we had apartments. And then, when university ended in about May, then we moved back to Imperial. So I had to change schools each time. But it was okay.
And after that?
After that, when I was about, how old was I? A few years after that, went on for a couple of years. And then when 1 year, I guess, because then the other brother, one had skipped a grade, they're twins. And when the other one had to go, then we moved more permanently. But my father still hadn't moved. And finally, when I was 16, the war was on, and my brother had completed his...
Which war?
Second World War. And my mother did want to get closer to her family in New York, and also the prospects were better here for my brothers. But my brother Maury, he came here.
To Toronto.
To Toronto, and he worked for the REL, Research Enterprises Limited, to do with the war. But my other brother, who graduated, Eddie, he came, but he enlisted. And the reason he enlisted was because if you did that, rather than being conscripted at a certain age, after they could stay out of the army until you finished school, but then you had to go. So he enlisted in the Signal Corps, so that he wouldn't just be a soldier. He'd be something different, something special. But as it turned out...
Was he a soldier?
After he came to Toronto, he was at a base, and then we got a letter from him. Like, he had to leave, and we had a party and so on. It was nice.
Well, why did he leave?
And then when he went back, right soon after, we got a letter from England that he was now in the war. Oh. So felt pretty bad.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, the Signal Corps
had
to go ahead of the soldiers.
What is the Second Corps?
Well, to examine to see if there's any mines on the field for the soldiers.
Oh.
But what turned out was they were the first ones to go on the field. Oh. The most dangerous part.
Who was?
And then when they found out it was okay, then the soldiers would follow.
Oh.
And the stories were how they jumped into the trenches, boots on top of people, and he went through
very hard.
And did he survive?
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm. Well, my daddy said someone died. Someone died right beside him.
Pardon, dear?
Daddy said someone died right beside him.
Well, I think it was Paris. And they were in Paris, and he was standing and talking to his best friend, maybe a few others. And suddenly there was a happening, and his friend was bombed. Killed right beside him. So my brother survived, but he came back a little differently. In those days they called it shell shock. My mother always said he suffered from shell shock. Today it's, what do you call it?
Post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress?
Yes, today they call
Something
it
like
post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
But he,
But when did you come to Toronto? Because from Saskatchewan and Imperial?
I came to Toronto when I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 1943.
And you stayed here, you didn't move again?
Yeah, we stayed in Toronto.
Stayed in Toronto. So when you came from Saskatchewan to here, did you travel by boat, by bus, by car, by train?
By train, which was quite a nice long trip, you know. Mm-hmm. But I remember my father standing on the station. He still couldn't come, but he was still going to sell his business and come. Okay. And I remember him standing on the station in Saskatoon. He'd come weekends and saying goodbye. And I remember crying on the train.
Aww. So
I wanted to come to Toronto, but I felt bad, really, really bad.
Of course. How was school different than it is today? Wait a second, wait.